Welcome to Naked History. You're listening to Unearthed.
The ancient mega-temple of Karnak. The earthly mansion of the Egyptian gods. And the exclusive playground of Egypt's ruling elite.
The feat of engineering here is just astronomical.
You can see the size of it.
But just how far back does the history of this place stretch? And what bizarre rituals went on behind its closed doors?
They would sing and dance for the gods because the gods were easily bored.
Today, new technologies and forensic detective work are revealing what life was like inside the ancient world's largest religious complex. To unearth Karnak's secrets, we'll explore this mega-temple stone by stone. We'll look inside its 30-foot thick walls and decode its 60-foot-high columns to lift the veil on life inside one of the ancient world's most secretive wonders. The sacred Egyptian site of Karnak. Generation after generation of pharaohs built temples here in honor of their own rule. The result is a sprawling city of religious structures from different eras, packed together like sardines. Karnak sits at the heart of the Egyptian Empire, 300 miles south of the Great Pyramids. This vast collection of religious buildings was also a seat of power for Egypt's mighty pharaohs. Like today's Vatican and White House rolled into one. What really went on behind these hallowed walls? Today, as engineers rebuild the shattered remains of Karnak, piece by piece, this extraordinary site is finally revealing its hidden secrets. It's a mammoth task.
There is huge blocks everywhere, different kind, different periods. It's like a puzzle, huge, big puzzle.
The parts of the complex archaeologists have restored revealed the spectacle that greeted elite guests more than 3,000 years ago. The elite allowed to enter Karnak were greeted by the massive hypostyle hall. Here, foreign dignitaries were received and mighty pharaohs rested under the shaded columns. Behind it, the festival hall Obelisks marked an exclusive gateway. Only priests and pharaohs could pass through to the inner temples. At the heart of this secret inner sanctum lay the most ancient known temple. But experts suspect that this site was venerated for so long that even older temples may lie hidden in the ruins. Antoine Garrick is the current lead on a massive restoration project, rebuilding Karnak to its former glory. He knows that ancient structures, unseen for thousands of years, could lie hidden inside this field of blocks. But to resurrect them, he first has to find the right pieces.
Okay, we are in the block yard south of Karnak Temple. There is thousands of blocks. That's where it all starts.
While hunting out the blocks for his latest reconstruction project, Antoine has learned something astonishing about the Egyptian builders. They were thieves.
Every pharaoh was dismantling other monuments and also reusing that block. If you turn a block, you discover a new face just behind.
Examining the scenes of these architectural crimes reveals some incredible surprises. Perhaps the greatest was discovered inside the ruins of one of Karnak's enormous walls. Within the fabric of a half-destroyed wall, archaeologists found the remains of hundreds of stolen blocks. They're the pieces to a near-complete temple called the White Chapel, the crowning glory of Senusret I, a former pharaoh. He covered the chapel in inscriptions, depicting his Jubilee festival. It once held the king's mighty double throne and honored the sun god. This holy shrine was callously destroyed to build the legacy of a future pharaoh. 9 similar towering walls were built on the Karnak site. The pharaohs that built each one covered them with ancient scripts, boasting of their divine status like a giant billboard. Today, Antoine and his team are reconstructing one of the walls. They believe it was carved in honor of the boy king Tutankhamun, more than 3,000 years ago. By completing this 30-foot-high jigsaw puzzle, Antoine hopes to reveal the forgotten history of King Tut's reign, scrubbed out by the rulers who followed him. The complexity of the task is enormous. But Antoine has technology on his side.
Instead, to make a huge scaffolding to measure the whole walls, to have to go 10 meters high, it's not needed. We just take photo from the ground. We have also to measure all the blocks in order to make the rebuilding first on the computer.
Antoine uses special software to see where his photos fit into the wall reconstruction.
When you click and you move your block, you can move it right and left. Draw on it, I can measure on it. So that's really faster than instead to build a scaffolding to measure all the blocks one by one, just with few pictures, and it's done.
Once he's sure where the virtual block goes, Antoine can haul the real thing into place.
We have half of the scene on that block. We just have to adjust perfectly the block with the other joint.
Antoine is confident this is the next piece in King Tut's monster puzzle.
The angle is okay. It's fitting to the ancient wall, so it's perfect.
Today's restorers are lucky to have modern machines to lift the 2-ton blocks into place. 3,500 years ago, the Egyptians had to use much more primitive tools. Instead of cranes, the ancient Egyptians made bricks from the mud of the Nile and stacked them into a gently sloping ramp. They added wooden tracks and pulled the massive stone blocks up on sleds. They used water to lubricate the path. The Egyptians built the ramp higher and higher to add more and more layers to the wall until it towered over 100 feet. Once the wall was complete, the ramp was destroyed. A huge wooden door and colorful flags were added as the final touches. Karnak, the largest religious complex in ancient Egypt, with a mountain of ruins to prove it. Historians believe this walled structure was a thriving miniature city, filled with homes and workplaces. But who was the elite religious society that lived here? And what did they do? To find this hidden city, you have to travel deep inside Karnak, far beyond the obelisks and into the sacred labyrinth of antechambers, reserved for the king and his spiritual entourage. Inside these secret rooms, priests and their religious aides would host ceremonies and daily rituals. But at the end of the working day, they would all retire to the hidden village beyond, a walled complex of hundreds of mud houses, space for thousands of people to live and work, a secret society to support the temple's colossal power. Campbell Price suspects the Egyptians who worked at Karnak may have been every bit as extraordinary as the temple itself. And today, with the help of his colleague Lydia McKnight, he has an opportunity to put his suspicions to the test.
We have 20 human mummies, several of whom come from the site of Thebes, and it's very likely that those people worked at the Temple of Karnak.
100 years ago, explorers unearthed these human remains very close to Karnak in what was the ancient city of Thebes. Campbell believes the resin-coated mummy is that of a temple worker called Perunbast. He hopes to unravel the secrets of her daily life by studying her remains and any artifacts hidden inside her wrappings.
So this is the lid of the coffin of Perunbast. She was discovered in a sealed tomb. And down here, we can see some hieroglyphs, which are a prayer to the gods to ensure that Perunbast would have a successful afterlife.
So is there any evidence on the coffin which tells us what her role was at the temple?
Right at the bottom, you can see her title. That's it, Shemait en Imen, which means singer, temple singer of Amun. And this tells us for sure that she worked in Karnak.
Campbell thinks Perrinbast's role as a temple singer would have been very different to that of a church singer today.
We think she was part of a small number of wealthy women who would go into the inner parts of the temple where the god's statue was kept, and they would sing and dance perhaps for the gods, because the ancient Egyptian gods were often easily bored, so they needed to be entertained.
Perrinbast would have sung songs to the statue of Amun-Ra every day to keep the sun god happy. But at key times in the calendar, her job became even more important. Perrinbast would have spent all year looking forward to the festival of Opet. When the Nile flooded, the pharaoh called the whole town to Karnak to worship the gods. Inside the temple, the priests dressed the statue of the god Amun-Ra, while Perrinbast and her colleagues sang his praises. The statue was carried out of the temple. Music filled the air, and the crowd showered the statue in offerings. The parade continued for many days. Finally, the statue was returned to the temple, with the hope that the floods would come again the following year. Campbell wants to know how old the mummies were when they died. This could reveal clues to their social class. Lydia shows him CT scans of a similar mummy she's been working on. It suggests women like Perrinbast were able to reach a surprisingly old age.
So in her spine here, you can see these little bony spurs. They're a common indicator of osteoarthritis. It's just by sheer wear and tear on the skeleton as people get older, which indicate that she was probably middle-aged, somewhere between 50 and 60.
An ordinary woman in ancient Egypt would expect to live to 30. For the Karnak workers to live twice as long, they must have lived a life of pure opulence, cut off from the grim reality of life outside the high temple walls. Campbell believes further clues to the social status of the temple singers could lie hidden inside their wrappings. Scans of Perrinbast's remains show strange shapes. Could they be valuable amulets? A sure sign of a high-status burial.
We can see there on the CT scan are two shapes.
Campbell wants to know what the shapes are, but the wrappings are too delicate to disturb. Instead, he asks a colleague to isolate the strange shapes from the CT scans. Then he uses sophisticated software to create a perfect facsimile of the objects in 3D. This model reveals details unseen for almost 3,000 years.
But as you can see, it's got a very distinctive hieroglyph on it. It's the eye of the god Horus. And we know in the Egyptian mythology, the eye of Horus was believed to be a strong symbol of protection. By having this symbol on your mummified body, it protected the deceased.
The discovery of the amulets and the fact that she was mummified suggests that Perrinbast was a highly valued member of the elite Karnak society. She would have lived a life of luxury and adulation, just like rock stars today. A life unimaginable to those outside the walls of the temple. The mighty temple complex at Karnak wasn't just designed with humans in mind. The Egyptians hoped to create earthly mansions for the gods, places the immortals would be happy to relax in when they visited the earth. But how can you create a house worthy of a passing deity? Karnak's biggest temple needed an equally large roof to protect the gods from the beating midday sun. Enormous beams were needed to span the vast distances between the columns and support hundreds of solid stone cross struts. In the central aisle, even larger blocks were used to bridge the gap. These beams were the key to creating a monumental feat of ancient engineering that plunged the massive hall into darkness, fit for a resting god. But the royal builders faced an immense challenge. The local limestone, similar to the rock used to build the pyramids, would snap under its own weight when balanced between the columns. The ancient Egyptians needed a much stronger material to build this vast roof. But where to find it? archaeologist Maria Nilsson believes the answer lies 100 miles south along the River Nile, at a remote quarry called Silsila. Famed for its super tough sandstone, she's uncovered ancient graffiti here that seems to reference a massive ancient quarrying operation around the time Karnak was built.
We got these figures. They are the masons, so they're actually chiseling out the block that comes from the mountain. Further down, they're controlled by the overseer, who's standing here with a whip, making sure that the work is being done properly.
Maria suspects the discovery of sandstone in this quarry was a turning point for the ancient Egyptians. For the first time, they were able to build bigger, taller, wider roofed structures, worthy of the gods they were so eager to please.
We believe that during the New Kingdom, Silsila was considered so important, and we have pharaohs who come and they write their names commemorating the event.
The pharaohs couldn't get enough of this new, stronger material. It allowed them to build ever more elaborate roofed structures.
The deeper they got into the mountain, the stronger the blocks would have been, and that's what they were all after.
But how did the Egyptian masons get these massive blocks out of the mountain and 100 miles back to Karnak? Maria's research partner, John Ward, thinks the chance discovery of this cracked abandoned beam offers vital clues.
Here we are in the mother of all quarries at Silsila, and we're confronted by this huge lintel, which would have been a roof lintel or some kind of architrave, but it's load-bearing. You can see the size of it.
John investigates the rock face behind this forgotten giant. He looks for clues to how the Egyptians worked their prized new stone.
Down in here, you would have had the ancient Egyptian quarryman tip, 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 tip away with his mallet and his chisel. And as we can see on the wall, we've got the chisel marks still in situ. One stroke going down, stop, another stroke going down, stop, and another stroke going down, stop.
The ancient Egyptians used bronze tools to carve out the sides of each block. Then they hammered metal wedges underneath the huge lintels to pry the stones free. John suspects the quarry workers then moved the beams by hand to riverboats bound for Karnak.
The feat of engineering here is just astronomical. That to think that this huge lintel was lifted by man onto a sledge, taken down the man-made ramp to the awaiting barges on the Nile.
John and his team are digging for evidence that the Egyptians constructed an extensive road network to help the quarrymen pull the huge roof beams out of the quarry.
We're actually defining the road that you can see coming all the way up to where we're standing now. And this allowed the quarried blocks to be taken down to the Nile and the awaiting rafts to Karnak Temple.
Once the giant beams arrived at Karnak, the construction team faced an even greater challenge. They needed to raise the beams 70 feet into the air. First, the Egyptians built the columns layer by layer, placing rough blocks in a checkerboard pattern across the hall. Then they filled the entire area with dirt, and then dragged another layer of blocks into place for 20 layers. When all the blocks were positioned, the mammoth roof beams were carefully placed on top of the solid mass of soil, 70 feet high. Finally, the dirt was removed, and the pillars were carved smooth to create the largest covered space in ancient Egypt. Egyptologist Erika Felig has spent 7 years studying the enormous hypostyle hall. She's looking for clues to the architect of the largest temple on site.
I love the detective story. I love figuring out what happened to this column before it ended up looking like it does today.
Incredibly, her seemingly simple task of identifying who built this massive temple has uncovered a remarkable story of high politics and royal vanity. The Hypostyle Hall is a gallery of ancient artwork. All 134 columns were once adorned with inscriptions. Every inch of stone told a story in vivid color. The markings boast of the godlike status of one man, a pharaoh whose symbol adorns the columns at every angle. Plastered all along the main avenue is the mark of Ramses II, nicknamed the Builder. This powerful pharaoh reportedly constructed more major buildings and statues in Egypt than any other king. But although his mark covers the hypostyle hall, Erica suspects that Ramses could be taking credit for the work of one of his predecessors. Today, she uses new technology to record the carvings and search for clues. This is a task that previous generations of archaeologists were unable to pull off.
The columns have never been recorded in detail, and that's mostly because of their enormous size. Traditional methods involved using transparent plastic sheets to trace over the figures. Because of the heat, the light, the gravity, all that plastic sheeting would have sagged, so we would have had distortions.
Instead of tracing the images, Erica uses photography and special software to reveal the smallest details hidden inside the carvings. She directs photographer Owen Murray to take the images.
I am photographing these columns, trying to get as high definition and high fidelity an image as possible. The major challenges that we're facing with these columns are height and consistency of light.
The marks Erica hopes to see are so faint they can only be photographed in very precise shaded lighting. This gives Owen only a small window to work each day.
We're dealing with the position of the sun as it moves throughout the day and trying to keep consistent with the quality of photograph. And that has been one of the bigger challenges. Up until this point, we haven't really been able to do that.
Owen takes hundreds of photos of the shaded column with an overhead light. This technique helps him to capture every detail of the carved stone surface. Erica then uses advanced 3D modeling to stitch Owen's photographs together. She then unrolls the curves into a single flat image. Now she can carefully analyze the stone surface, hunting for the remains of old inscriptions, scrubbed out and recarved with the name of Ramses.
There are times when we'll take a photo and it's only after 2 weeks, once we process it or play with the lighting, that we realize, oh, we actually captured something that looks like a recarved inscription. If you look closely, you can see traces of what used to be the outlines of some of the hieroglyphs that were part of that initial decoration.
Erica believes these faint scratches, hidden beneath the main inscription, are the scrubbed-out remains of another pharaoh's mark. Once Erica identifies the overwritten text, she checks it out in real life. She uses mirrors to manipulate the daylight to help the faint carved lines stand out.
So the two large ovals you can see contain the names of Ramses II, and behind them you can still see the outline traces of Seti I.
At key points in the hall, especially along the grandest and most visible central walkway, Ramses' name overwrites that of his own father, Pharaoh Seti I.
And you can still see the faint traces towards the left side of the Ramses II.
Ramses was desperate to replace his father's name with his own. But the old pharaoh had made his son's deception almost impossible to pull off. Ramses' father was an art connoisseur. His carvings were elaborate, with deep outlines and raised figures. So when Seti died and Ramses took the throne, the new pharaoh faced an uphill task to erase the memory of his predecessor. Ramses erected scaffolding around the pillars. He chopped the raised images off, but he still couldn't get rid of the deep outlines. In his haste, he scraped his name on top in simple sunk relief carvings. Finally, he used a thin layer of plaster to conceal the faint traces of his father, which the weathering of time has only now revealed. Ramses proclaimed his power by claiming the hypostyle hall for his own. But surprisingly, this towering structure isn't the tallest monument on site. That prize goes to the nearby Obelisks. How were these colossal single carvings made? And how did the Egyptians get them here? Karnak's giant obelisks are one of the greatest marvels of the ancient world. These massive single pieces of rock have puzzled archaeologists for years. That's because they're carved from one of the hardest rocks on Earth, granite.
Obelisk is a big mystery in ancient Egypt, not for the reason why they just make the obelisk, but the reason for how to cut it.
How did the ancient Egyptians work this toughest of materials with only primitive tools? Although only 2 still stand today, at its prime, Karnak boasted 13 colossal obelisks. 6 dominated the center of the temple at the festival hall. The tallest towered 100 feet high, and all were made from super tough granite to stop them from snapping. The tips were painted with glimmering gold to reflect the sun's rays. Engravings boast they were carved in just 7 months. But how? Adel Kalani has spent his career unearthing the secrets of Egyptian stonemasons. He's convinced that the metal chisels used to build limestone pyramids and sandstone temples would have had little effect on the tough granite used to build the obelisks. Today, he examines a half-extracted obelisk, most likely abandoned by the Egyptians when the massive blocks split.
Fortunately for us, it is not finished because it gives us a lot of clues how the Egyptian cut obelisk from hard stone like granite.
Adel first examines the surface of the stone for telltale marks, but the dents he finds are hard to interpret. Next, he looks in the dirt under the stone and uncovers something surprising.
We did find ash and charcoal. This is important for us. That's a proof that fire-setting operation are the main techniques for splitting hard stones.
The surprise discovery of charcoal suggests that fire may have played some part in the extraction of the giant blocks. To test the theory, Adel lights a series of fires on top of a nearby outcrop. He wants to see if heating and then quenching the hard rock makes it easier to work.
We need to try and to test the fire-setting operation and how it could help for making the work extremely fast.
The team keeps a close eye on the temperature while checking for any signs of weakness.
We can hear a cracking sound, which is really quite strong, and that makes the workmen a bit scared that stone actually fallen down while they are on the top of this stone. So that's actually promising that there are some movement, but we have to wait until the fire calms down.
The team quenches the fire with water.
Wow. But if you come close to see, the stone actually just completely cracking. This is the result of cooling the fire by water. And looks like destroyed the whole surface.
To test if the fire has made the hard rock easier to work, Adel instructs one team to pound the heated rock. For comparison, he gets another to pound on the untreated surface. Both hammer for 9 minutes. Then Adel examines the results.
If you need to comment the distance of the work in around 9 minutes, it's about 5 centimeters, and here it's a few millimeters. It's really big difference.
The heat-treated hole is nearly 2 inches deep, seemingly 10 times quicker to work through than the untreated rock. A stunning result. It's early days, but Adel believes fire was the key to building Karnak's granite obelisks. But how did they transport these 450-ton monoliths to Karnak? Historians believe the Egyptians dug canals deep into the landscape, so water from the Nile would flow towards the quarries. The obelisk was suspended over the water. Then a boat was weighed down with tons of stone, so that when it was emptied, it would pick up the obelisk and carry it down the Nile to Karnak. At Karnak, hundreds of construction workers then gradually dug away the earth with great precision to tilt the giant stone upright. Lastly, they slotted the base of the obelisk into a groove and attached ropes to haul it into its final position. The colossal journey of this 450-ton block was complete. Archaeologist Benjamin Durand is unearthing evidence that the fall was triggered by the rise of a new religion that was set to change the world.
So we are in the sacred area of the Temple of Ptah. What is very interesting in Ptah Temple is we have one of the oldest standing building in Karnak, and we also have the youngest. So here we really have all these periods concentrated.
The hieroglyphs reveal how the rule of Karnak changed over its final years. And the last name on the list seems strangely foreign.
This door jamb and the text written on it is very interesting, as this is the last text written in the Ptah Temple. We have here written the name of the Caesar who asked for the writing of this text. His name is Tiberius.
Tiberius wasn't an Egyptian. He was the leader of the mighty Roman Empire. Karnak had been seized by a foreign power. Benjamin unearths evidence that Karnak's new overlords brought the temples crashing down. Because just 300 years after they arrived, the Romans made a momentous cultural change.
What we see here is part of this pot stand. We can see this fish that is a typical Christian symbol.
1600 years ago, the Roman Empire turned its back on paganism and converted to a new faith, Christianity.
The fact that here we have a Christian occupation means that as they have only one God, it was not possible for them to accept that there is a religion with a lot of gods.
Roman leaders ordered the immediate closure of all non-Christian sites across Egypt, including the biggest of them all, Karnak. Benjamin's work is slowly revealing what happened next.
We are now discovering houses and all the different kind of structure we can find with this occupation.
He suspects that he's uncovered the entrance to a family home.
So what we are looking for next to the door is this kind of red brick. So when we have this kind of small details, it helps us to understand that, okay, here we must have a door. So that's something good for us.
Benjamin is convinced this whole area was once filled with houses.
This kind of grain stone is dating from the Roman period, very common for this period. They may have needed in every family to crush the grain.
The Romans transformed Karnak's deserted temples into a bustling Christian community.
With this evidence, we can say that at this time, the temple on the first side was closed and that the people living around were Christian.
Karnak's downfall was the final nail in the coffin for the ancient Egyptian civilization. No more pharaohs were buried in the Valley of the Kings. The Sphinx was lost to the sands of the desert, and the Great Pyramids were swamped by the city. The religion that built these iconic monuments was no more. Without it, the art, temples, and politics that had defined this civilization for 3,000 years had no reason to continue. And the world would never be the same again. Archaeologists continue piecing together the bizarre inner workings of life at Karnak, Egypt's most mysterious religious complex. Its walls bear the mark of 30 pharaohs, its myriad buildings a testament to their individual quest for power. What amazing secrets could still lie buried under the towering columns and giant walls of the largest religious complex in the ancient world?
Naked History is brought to you by Element 18. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a comment below and subscribe to our channel for new videos every week.